Hello and welcome to IBTimes TV. I'm Lianna, Brinded, business editor for the International Business Times. Joining me now is Heyrick Bond Gunning. He's the MD of Salamanca Group. So hi, thanks for joining us.
Hi, good to see you.
Great. Well, kicking off, cybercrime, how much does it really impact British banks and businesses at the moment?
I think the UK government's statistics from last year, they estimate that it costs UK business about £21 billion a year. What's really interesting is the industry itself has grown as well as the threats increased. And so what we've seen is that the business grow to a business that's worth probably about $64 billion a year. That's an estimate of ours. And we are increasingly seeing the banks understanding the threats and the risks that they are under throughout, their operations in the UK, but also as they branch out into emerging markets.
Sure. When it comes to technology and of course the systems that banks and financial institutions use, they're evolving at such a rapid pace that how do you see operational risk compliance and assessments catching up with that?
I think the technology question is a really interesting one, because actually if you look at US statistics last year, I think they saw a 27% increase in devices, in handheld devices. So not only do you have your protective measures that you need to put on in place within your building, but actually all of your employees are running around with a whole load of devices, and some will have one or two, and those need to be managed very, very carefully as well. What we're seeing our clients doing is moving to sort of a managed service where those can be monitored on their behalf, because actually it's very expensive to set that sort of infrastructure up internally, and the expense will vary tremendously depending on the size of the institution.
Sure, and where do you see most of these, I suppose, cybercrime attacks come from? Is it mostly external, or is there still a core internal problem?
Yeah, well, I think on pure cyber, about 98% is external, and of that, 96% is malicious, and the rest is 96% is financial intent, and the rest is either malicious or simply, people just want to have a go because it's fun. And so I think what should also be remembered is the fact that while cyber is one issue, the actual management of information is a completely separate one that people have forgotten about. It's a more traditional way in which people manage information within a business, and that is often where the holes appear when people are perhaps looking at the security of information around a deal.
Sure. And can you give us some examples of what would be considered as cybercrime? We hear about denial of service attacks, maybe that and some other issues.
Yeah, there are some lovely examples with more recently Saudi Aramco in the Middle East. The Shamoon virus knocked out, I think, about 30,000 PCs, and that was reportedly came from someone picking up a memory stick and stick it into their desktop. It then spread like wildfire within Saudi Aramco, and to be honest, it had a real impact on the way in which they did business for 2 or 3 months. That has a huge cost to the business itself. At another level, you see the loss of information through to hacking with Sony PlayStation, which they estimate it costs them about $70 million. I would say that's conservative, because of course the reputational impact is the bit that's really, really hard to quantify, but can have a huge impact as well.
Sure, but when it comes to cases like the Saudi Aramco issue, how can a business mitigate their risk of something like that happening, or at least it affecting them in the same way it did for them?
Yeah, I think the key thing is to start by understanding what the important bits of information are within a business, because actually you could turn it into a Fort Knox scenario, but it would just become extremely difficult to undertake your business, and it would be totally impractical. And so the key is to have levels of information, some of which are very well protected, and others that are less important and less well protected. And then have the ability to lock down areas if there is a cyber attack and your firewalls are penetrated, because there will be penetration at some point, because this is an evolving thing and it's a constant race against those that are trying to attack you. So if you've got those procedures in place, you can then look at educating your employees in the workforce around the ways in which they handle information as well.
Well, in the banks and business world, I mean, there has been, because of changing regulation in the US, EU, and the UK, there's been a lot more focus in strengthening compliance and operational risk, maybe in the front room trading side, risk management, maybe in the back office. But there doesn't seem to be as much emphasis on the cybercrime part of it. It's usually after the fact.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So do you think that is starting to change, or do you think people should take it a lot more seriously than they do now?
I think there's a gradual change. I think what will precipitate more change is the European Commission directive that came out earlier this year, which will be in force in 2015, and that's all about cybercrime, and cybercrime around critical national infrastructure and financial services are deemed as part of that. Interestingly, in Germany, they've accepted that this is the way ahead, and part of the issue that the UK has with it is that if you are under attack and you lose information, you're meant to be telling the EC that something like that has happened, which of course has huge reputational impact on your business. Now, my personal view is that there'll be, in the next 6 months, as people begin to understand what they're meant to be doing, there'll be a sort of paralysis, rather like there was around FCPA and the Bribery Act, and then people will understand that there are some pretty core but basic principles that can be put in place throughout an organisation, combined with some technical support, which will enable them to operate as normally as they would before.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. And that was Heyrick Bond Gunning. He's the MD of Salamanca Group.